bilateral meeting between President Trump and Prime Minister Modi. What exactly can we expect? A lot on the table really to discuss, but what can be the possible outcomes? Well, joining us are two individuals who've handled diplomacy from India's and US's perspective at the very highest levels. With us is former Foreign Secretary of India, Madhavdas Shringla. Also with us is retired Ambassador Atul Keshup, President of USIBC, who has also, of course, represented US diplomatically speaking in New Delhi. Let me begin with you, Mr. Shringla. A lot that's on the table. There are, of course, shared opportunities, shared vision that the two countries have fundamentally got, but there are some challenges also in the way. What's your expectation from this bilateral meeting?
This visit comes within 25 days of President Trump taking over office in a second term. And I think it's very significant because this is an opportunity for the two leaders, Prime Minister Modi and President Trump, to re-establish that close connect that they had under Trump 1.0, to look at how they could envisage a roadmap on the next steps to our strategic partnership. And of course, I think encompass areas that are very important to us, whether it is on the economic side of trade and investments, whether it is on the side of energy or defense or people-to-people contacts. And I think it will be very significant also because we are already getting news of two major agreements from what I could see. One is on the decision to fast-track negotiations on a free trade agreement that should be concluded well within this year. Mind you, we already had started work on that agreement during Trump 1.0. I think Atul would know about that as well. Both of us were part of that effort. And the second, of course, is that we might have even a defense framework agreement, which is a revision of the earlier agreement signed, I think, a couple of decades ago, which then I think brings increasing, I think, value to that defense partnership that is there. We still have to see the contours of that agreement, but I think it would bring in some very, very relevant new updates in that defense cooperation, including co-production, manufacturing, research, etc.
Well, that's a big one, certainly, because India's own, plans as far as Atmanirbhar Bharat, Make in India are concerned, Ambassador Keshup, are, of course, very well known. But the big challenge has been whether that technology transfer will happen. And if it does happen, what really is the fine print in that regard? How are you viewing this? Because this is really something that could be a game changer, isn't it?
Well, it certainly could be. And let me start by conveying my respects to Ambassador Shringla. It's great to see him, and he spoke with great wisdom as usual. We need to break through the barriers that hold us back on defense, right? We have made so much progress in the past 25 years, but we're not yet there. We need to ensure that the two greatest democracies on earth have the greatest deterrent capability. And that means that we need to break through the bureaucratic barriers that are still holding us back. On the drone deal, we have made enormous progress. On the engines, we have made enormous progress. Now let's start focusing on, drone warfare in the 21st century, net-centric warfare, warfare that is, and deterrence capability that is driven by artificial intelligence. At the end of the day, our opponents need to think twice. And so if we can break through on things like fighter planes and get past the sticking points of the last few years, it'll be entirely good for the American and Indian people. So I'm hopeful.
Absolutely. And, Mr. Shringla, if I can bring you in on that, when it comes to defense cooperation, US has been pushing for more and more purchases of military hardware from the Indian side. India has, of course, purchased a tremendous amount of military hardware, but India has had traditional relationships with France, with Russia, for instance, where, of course, there has been a history and, that has been an important aspect as well. How far do you see this? Because we've seen what President Trump has said in this regard as well. Are you seeing this as something that will be in continuation or increasing in coming years? What exactly is your perspective on this, Mr. Shringla?
So, first of all, let me say something. The two are mutually incompatible. Any defense deal would start with initial acquisitions. Take, for example, if you would manufacture, say, the C-130 in India, you'd first get some numbers of that aircraft on an as-is basis. You would then start assembling it in India, and then ultimately you'd have greater manufacturing abilities of that particular aircraft in the country. So I think US companies, American companies, and again, Atul has to correct me on this, are increasingly open to the idea of co-production, joint research and development, technology transfers, and essentially becoming partners in that area of defense production and cutting-edge technologies. So whether it is the C-130, whether it is military combat vehicles, whether it is other areas, including jet engines, which Atul mentioned, I think there is increasing scope to work together to produce, defense equipment that are world class. Take that partnership into the 21st century and work together in furthering our shared strategic interests. And I think that is very important, that it is not just a commercial partnership, it is shared strategic interests. And of course, it is a win-win situation for both countries if we can work that out.
Right, absolutely. And we've seen this in the past. For instance, Ambassador Keshav, there's in fact been several of those defense logistical agreements, including LEMOA, that we saw being signed between the two countries. But actually operationalizing that does become challenging. How do you see, all of this cooperation actually impacting on ground? Ambassador Keshav.
Well, let's look, for instance, at the possibility of increasing shipbuilding between the United States and India. Maybe instead of each of us doing it entirely on our own, we do it collaboratively. We do things in India that make comparative advantage sense over there, and then we do things over here that make sense based on our industries and capabilities. We do have to increase shipbuilding rather considerably, given what the Chinese are doing. So that's an area. Another would be drones. We should look at the rather significant growth in the Indian drone ecosystem, apply to it the technology that new tech companies like Anduril and SpaceX and Palantir have, and really make some pretty impressive platforms for ensuring our deterrence. Plus, as Ambassador Shringla mentioned, we have a fantastic track record of co-development and co-production now. Look at the legacy OEMs like Lockheed Martin and Boeing working with Indian partners in Hyderabad to develop the aerospace industry. Let's double down on that. Let's start making more platforms between the United States and India, leveraging the strengths of each of our economies.
Yeah, Mr. Atul Keshav, how are you looking at this? As in fact, Mr. Shringla was saying, very important that, we have the people at the highest levels of the administration engaging with Prime Minister Modi one-on-one. It's not just the engagement as far as the bilateral meeting with President Trump is concerned, but very significant that he's meeting with figures who are so important in the US administration as well, and goes to show how deep the ties between India and US are.
Well, absolutely. And look at the fact that Prime Minister Modi and Vice President Vance met in Paris. That is the kind of indication we have of the strength of the relationship. The National Security Advisor, the Secretary of State, the Director of National Intelligence, and so on and so forth. This is a very broad-based relationship. And I think it's important to note that within the first month of President Trump's second term in office, the Prime Minister of India is visiting. Look at who else has visited so far. Prime Minister of Israel, Prime Minister of Japan, the King of Jordan. These are key allies. And if we look back even 10, 15, 20 years, the notion that the Prime Minister of India would be one of the top 4 or 5 foreign leaders to visit Washington in a new administration would be unthinkable. So we have come a very, very long way in the past couple decades, and now we need to build on it. I am delighted by the rumors that there may be an ambitious trade deal that will begin negotiations toward intensifying our technological collaboration, our economic collaboration. Look, we got to get it right. We have no choice. We are the 2 great free nations of the world, and we have to lead the world in positive ways. So I'm delighted they're doing this so early.
Absolutely. All right. And while there is areas of, collaboration, clearly, Mr. Shringla, the challenges are there. There are challenges of tariffs, for instance, India announcing in the budget certain, considerations as far as United States manufacturers are concerned. But we have seen how President Trump has often spoken about reciprocal tariffs. While he hasn't announced anything specific to India, he has made some announcement in relation to other countries. How worried are you about this particular position that has been taken by the United States, Mr. Shringla?
So I've always said on 1.0, we should have a policy that should be both preemptive and proactive. And I think to a certain extent we have. I mean, the last budget reflected tariff cuts that were designed to suit, U.S. Access to the Indian market. And I think Prime Minister Modi would have more to offer when he has his meeting with President Trump and his team. Clearly, we will have a situation that can look at redressing the trade imbalance that exists between the two sides, and redressing that issue. At the same time, I think we should be looking at new areas of collaboration, not just in terms of increased defense and energy supplies, but also possibly technologies such as advanced and small modular reactors. This is an area that completely suits our requirements, and the US has the technology. I think these are the areas that we can introduce. We should look at taking the initiative on critical and emerging technologies forward, even if it's under some different name and nomenclature. But the fact of the matter is that these are important areas that we bring into the relationship that adds value to that trade basket and the economic exchanges that we have between our two sides. So I would not be very worried on the tariff front. I think the two sides have dealt with this before. The fact that we're talking about having a fast-track negotiation process that would give us greater market access through a partial free trade agreement by September or so this year, I think these are all positive signs. And the signs that India is engaging, as I said, preemptively, the Trump administration in meeting their requirements, but also taking that trade partnership forward is a very, very positive signal.
Right. And in fact, Ambassador Keshav, I'd like to take you up on one of the points made here by Mr. Shringla, and that is of, the smaller reactors. We've seen how in the union budget recently, there's been some amount of, announcements in that regard. And the fact is that since 2008, the kind of Indo-U.S. nuclear deal, which was a game changer at that point of time, on ground, however, operationalizing it has been a challenge. And India has sort of alluded to the fact that it's, open to changing the legal architecture around that, because the liability clause has been one of those areas which has been a cause of concern. Do you think that that's one area where we could see some rapid progress in coming days?
Well, I would certainly hope so. We did an enormous amount of good work together in getting the nuclear deal done, and now we need to see it implemented, especially in this era of artificial intelligence, where energy consumption is only going to get more intense. You only need to look as far as Germany, which shut down its nuclear industry, to see a country that is slipping out of being industrialized and is relying on coal because of that. And so, I think there's a lot of interest in India in using modular nuclear reactors to power and provide the energy for India's growing industrial base. This is a very smart policy decision by the government of India. There's a lot of technology collaboration that we can do together. Our companies are impatient to get working with Indian colleagues and counterparts to do that. We at USIBC just had the honor of hosting Minister Hardeep Singh Puri in Delhi at India Energy Week on hydrocarbons, on nuclear, and on every other energy technology. We can be fantastic partners together. However, and I said this in writing the other day, we have to break through the bureaucratic and policy barriers that have held us back. And so we need to look at the policy and regulatory and legal frameworks in order to unleash this, because if we don't get it right, our competitors will, and they will outpace us. We cannot afford that.
Right. Mr. Atul Keshav and Mr. Harshvardhan Shringla, I'd like to thank both of you gentlemen for joining us and sharing with us your valuable perspectives and deep insights into what the roadmap ahead is and what we can expect from this big bilateral meeting that's coming up. Thank you so much for joining us.